seminary. So I give you Father Pavlak.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you all very much. Thank you for having me today to talk about the work that the Vocations office is doing here in St. Paul, Minneapolis. Debbie asked to share briefly about myself before I kind of give what the Vocations office looks like right now. If people ask me, like, how do you know you were called to be a priest? I just kind of give it's true, but it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's more like, well, I was attracted to the priesthood, I applied, they accepted me, and I got ordained. A lot of men, you can kind of point to certain moments in your life where you feel that the Lord was speaking to you in a little bit of a different way. But the reason why I put it that kind of direct way is because my approach to discernment, or maybe I was just say, I think a lot of the modern way of discernment for a lot of guys is almost paralyzing for them. There's so many choices, they don't know what to do. And when you just speak very clearly to them, I'm kind of learning how to do this with them as I speak right now, but it's more God's will. His vocation for you isn't like a magical thing that has to be figured out in a magical way. The Lord created us to know Him and to love Him. He's not going to speak to us in a foreign way. And so trying to understand that, for the guys to understand that. But I think I can look back in my life, and look at various moments when I was in junior high, high school, in college. I probably started seriously thinking about it in college, junior year of college specifically. And that was enough for me to speak with a priest, now deceased, Father Paul Serra, and a good friend of mine who I went to World Youth Day with him when I was a sophomore in high school. So, and his example was very profound for me. He seemed to be the first priest I met, who I knew personally, who was both a little bit younger, and then also just, if you knew Father Serra, the priesthood just fit him like a glove. And he made it like so normal, and that was attractive to me. I don't think I realized it in the first moment I met it, that like a seed was planted. But he was the first priest I talked to say like, hey, I think I might want to be a priest, what do I do? And then the rest is history. So that's kind of no flashy moments, no loud voices, but a deep attraction to the priesthood. I applied, I got accepted, I got ordained. So that's my vocation story right there. Now for a little bit of work, talk about the work in the Vocations office. I thought I was busy at SJV last year, but holy cow, friends, this is another level. I'm doing a lot of other stuff right now. I'm doing some work in campus ministry at St. Thomas. They don't have a full-time chaplain, so I'm putting about 15 hours a week with campus ministry at St. Thomas, doing some spiritual direction on the side for some seminarians who are not part of St. Paul, Minneapolis. So I'm pouring myself out a lot, but it's really good. But within the Archdiocese Vocations office alone, I looked at my calendar. Since I started July 1st, I've met with over 30 young men who are on some, and that I've got one later today that doesn't count, part of the 30, and like 3 more next week, I think. So Thanksgiving weeks, actually I don't get the day off on the Friday or Saturday because guys are coming home from college, and that's the time for me to meet with them, But 30 men. Now all those 30 men, maybe I can kind of break down like where they're at in their discernment, where they're at in life. So some of them have come back to their faith and have taken more of an interest in their faith, and they're thinking maybe God is calling them to be a priest. With guys like this, I don't give them an application right away, but I give them pointers on how to maintain a good prayer life. So maybe there's a new excitement in their faith, and they're like, okay, the zeal is kind of there. It's like, okay, good, I'm glad it's there. Let's kind of test this out and give you some pointers on how to maintain a good prayer life. And if after some time of doing that, maybe like a year or 2 years, and I can see some more stability in a prayer life, okay, let's talk about an application to the seminary if that's where you're at. It's very similar to guys, the second group of guys I meet with who are converts. The church actually wisely recommends, maybe you know this, a minimum of 2 years before a convert enters the seminary. There's a lot of new zeal, and that we can learn a lot from their zeal. Like we who are lifelong Catholics, like we kind of miss having that zeal at one point. But for a lot of young men, they become Catholic. There's a lot of zeal behind that. Okay, how do I go further? Let's go become a priest. Okay, let's maybe someday. That's very common. It's not uncommon. But the church says just get used to being Catholic for a couple of years. So I met with a couple of guys who I said, okay, nice to meet you. Great story. Let's keep in touch for the next couple of years, and then we'll talk about an application. Some guys are they're a bit lost with their vocations, and they just needed a little bit of a nudge in a certain direction. I'm thinking of a couple guys I've met who just don't have a lot of direction in life, and they think like, well, maybe I got to be a priest. And I meet with them, and nice guys, but very clear, not called to be a priest. I don't think it would work for them. And no judgment of their character, but just like in my estimation, is probably not for the priesthood. But you can just see a weight lifted off, like, okay, like they can just kind of feel like, good. I thought maybe, again, like discernment was kind of some mystery thing that I had to figure out. But no, if there's no attraction to the priesthood, don't become a priest. You know, they need permission. It's like they need permission to be told that, you know, by the church. They just, nope, go on. And then there are some guys who have thought about this, they've prayed about this, they've received a lot of good promptings from the Lord saying, look into this, and they have received applications. My lips are sealed with how many applications I've given out right now, but I don't think I'm done giving out applications, which is an exciting thing. So right now, I looked at my calendar again, it's over 30 different guys, but I've had a lot of meetings with maybe their second or third meeting with me. After 5 months of being on the job now, I'm really having a lot of fun. A lot of my job is actually overseeing the formation of the current seminarians. It's not just helping men with the application process to enter seminary, it's also overseeing the formation of the guys who are currently in seminary. A lot of that is just handing them over to the college seminary or the major seminary and say, okay, Father Jengdahl and you seminary, you priest, you take over their formation and you walk with them. But then they report to me and how the progress of the guy is doing. I can help with parish assignments for a teaching parish, a summer assignment, things like that. But by and large, their formation happens inside the seminary walls. But as vocation director, I do have an obligation to oversee that and make sure guys are doing fine in their progress. And then I report to the Archbishop. Archbishop and I have a standing meeting once a month, but he's just a text message away from me if I need something. He's very responsive, very good. I was just with Archbishop last night with the guys from SJB, a little pizza party that they put on, a Q&A session with Archbishop, asking some mix of funny questions and good serious questions, and he really loves to be around the guys, and they love having him around. I'm trying to foster just more of a father-son relationship with their own Archbishop. It's a beautiful thing. Archbishop loves that kind of attention, and not he's not needy, but like, you know, he just likes being around the guys and having that youthfulness. So any way we can foster that is really good. Another joy of being in the vocations office is every time I listen to these new men who are discerning, thinking about the priesthood, I get to relive my own vocation story, in a sense. Like, so tell me why you want to be a priest. Well, this and this and this, and like as I'm listening to them, I'm going back like, yeah, I remember doing that too, or feeling that too. So getting to relive that 30 different times over the course of 5 months is a real blessing for me and motivating for my own priesthood, that these young men are offering the first fruits of their years, 18 to 22 years old, like the prime of life. And what are they going to do? They're going to go to a seminary and wake up at 6 a.m. and pray 2 hours every day, right? Just very different from a standard college person. So I want to honor that. And it's really humbling for me to see these young men coming in the seminary, or to think about seminary and give their life to the Lord. You might be aware that there's something called the NCDVD, the National Conference of Diocesan Vocation Directors. Minneapolis was the host. So I'm a brand new July 1st, like, great, now host 200 women coming in, right? So my job was to run around like crazy finding liturgical supplies for the makeshift chapel that we had. University of St. Thomas was very good. They let me borrow a lot of candles and crucifix and incense and chalices and things like that. But so we had to host that. But then going to all these talks and conferences was very, very helpful. Debbie asked me to share anything that stuck out that was really helpful for me. A couple things that was. One, more broadly speaking, it's great to network with other diocesan vocation directors and just to put a face to them. You know, as a vocation director, you're kind of a unicorn and a ghost at the same time. You're a unicorn because you're the only one in your diocese that does what you do. You're a ghost, and that canon law mentions nothing about a vocation director, right? So you're like no sort of like, because the bishop, he's the vocation director, right? The bishop is the vocation director. And you don't have any sort of canonical rights that canon law protects as a vocation director. So you're just kind of an extension of the bishop to work on his behalf. And that's beautiful. I like doing that. So I say that because when you meet a vocation director from across the country, there's this immediate connection and understanding of each other and one's work. But more particularly speaking, I think something that was really helpful for me to learn about was different things with psychological reports. That's a very key element of an application. So for you to know kind of the application process, a man comes to me, I meet him for about an hour, hour and a half, kind of get a lay of him and to see like, okay, is there something here? If I do think, yeah, I think there's a possible vocation here, then he'll get an application. He does the application. He comes back to me for what's called a formal interview. And I use his application and his autobiography as like the launching pad for the questions I want to ask him in his formal interview. After the formal interview, if I further think, yeah, I think there's something here, we then would send him to schedule a psychological evaluation. It's not a scary thing. I try to tell the guy that it's not like we see something wrong with you, but I went through one, every priest goes through them, it's just a good kind of clean bill of health that we want to look for the guy. But I'm not trained to how to read those reports. And that's where the NC-DVD was helpful. Like, these are the things you kind of want to look for when you get the psychological report back. Another thing, too, that I learned with NC-DVD is it was hammered home into us by one of the priests. He's like, look, your bishop chose you to do this job. And that you encompasses your intuition, your wisdom, your prudence, and your, frankly, kind of your gut instinct. You got to learn to lean into that and trust that. And just trust that if your bishop chose you, he wants to use your gifts particularly for this work in discerning if a guy is called to do the seminary. So those were just good for me to kind of just think about and remember. Very quickly, some various events that we've had that I'm very proud of this year. Back in August 15th, we had an info session at SGB. Probably had about 20 young men show up for that along with their parents. Dinner, a presentation of the college seminary, and they got a little tour of the seminary as well. So I had some seminarians break up into small groups and tour SGB. That was back in August. Earlier this month, in this very room, actually, the blue room here, we had the Archbishop's Discernment Retreat. 10 young men came with the Archbishop, with myself, a few seminarians to give their own testimonies, and that was great. We had a lot of good one-on-one time with the guys, talk about seminary life, talk about priesthood, of course. And that is not so much of a make or break for guys as far as like, okay, now I know to enter seminary. For some guys it can. It's more to give them tools on how to pray about this and discern about the priesthood. But we had 10 men early this month. A couple weeks ago, we had the Andrew Dinner. You know what the Andrew Dinner is, and we had some of the Sarans were helping with that. Thank you. Myself, the bishops, and priests who were there, including this number, we had over 70 people there for this. Patty, my assistant, said that's the most we've ever had for an Andrew Dinner.
Wow.
50 of them are probably young men who are college, high school guys, or maybe a little bit post-college, maybe so like 16 years old to maybe 24 years old, kind of age range. But 50 young men. I asked at the beginning of the talk, I'm like, who here thought you were coming to a dinner for like 12 people? And they're like, yeah, they thought like that was what it was. But when you see 50 young men and 14 priests and 3 bishops there, and that gives you a lot of momentum and a lot of courage to like, okay, I'm not alone in this. In fact, I'm definitely not alone. There's 50 other young men who are somewhat open to the priesthood. If it's a small group, you kind of feel pressure, you kind of feel awkward about it, But with that many people, I was very grateful. So it was a very excellent event. We have another Andrew Dinner coming up in February. We have a Miriam Dinner for young women coming up in January as well. And then again, just last week, we had the Vianney visit. So 20 young men from St. Paul, Minneapolis, high schoolers. They came to the Vianney visit, St. John Vianney. They slept in the dorms for a couple days. They went to class with the seminarians, ate lunch, dinner with the seminarians, prayed, mass, of course, had one-on-one time. The seminarians are what really, really sell the seminary. And that's the last thing I'm going to close with. It's the seminarians who really do a lot of the grunt work. Anytime we have guys who are interested, if I can get them to come and hang out and speak with the seminarians, the men who are thinking of seminary, they do much more work than I could ever do. And so anytime I can bring a seminarian with me or a couple guys to, because the seminarian, think of the seminarian, they're the bridge between the gap. You've got the guy who's discerning, you've got the priesthood, the seminarian is kind of like the bridge between that. And so anytime a guy can meet a seminarian, understand who he is, find out he's normal, he's got hobbies like I do, he likes sports like I do, whatever it is, then that guy sees himself as a seminarian possibly. And that's huge. That takes a lot of fear away and a lot of mystery away from the whole process. And seminarians, they love, love, love talking about seminary. So to get them going and fired up actually is a formation thing. It's not just so much that I can take work off my plate to talk. it's actually a formative thing for the seminary to see him come alive and own his own vocation, the more he can talk about it. So it's actually helping him out too. That's what I have for you. I can take any questions for the next 5 minutes if you have anything. Yes, sir, please.
Could you flesh out your vocation story just a little bit? I'm intrigued by the big family, parish, grade school, etc.
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of 9 kids. I was baptized at St. Helena's by Father Richard Villano. I think it was he was there for like 40 years. I was the only baby he baptized to become a priest, is what he told me. And but 9 kids. I went to Catholic school my whole life. So St. Helena's, kindergarten 1, and then 2nd through 12 at St. Agnes and St. Paul. And so Catholic school was my whole life. And that was very powerful for me. I think being an altar boy was extremely important for me. Again, when you're a boy and you're serving at Mass, you don't understand the deep theology of what's going on, but I knew that what I was doing was important, and it was at the same time like just very manly. I don't know how to describe it, but like it was attractive. And I loved to serve. I wasn't nervous to do it. I was good at it, in fact. Well, as I got older, I kind of realized, okay, that's just the Lord's way of getting my attention. Like, maybe you could do this permanently. Maybe, think about that. I do remember one time though, when I was in high school, and the junior high religion teacher, she was doing a show and tell in the sacristy for her junior high kids. And she knew that I knew my way around the sacristy. Mark, can you come and help out? I'm like, sure, I'll go there. And the permanent deacon, who was there, Deacon Harold Houston, a proper British gentleman, was there, and he was helping out too. And there's the vestments laid out. And the teacher said, oh, Mark, could you just put those on and so we can see what they look like? And I knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to get me to think about the priesthood. Well, as you know, there's the amice, that's the thing that goes around the collar. There's the alb, and then there's the cincture. The cincture is that rope that goes around the waist. Well, if you don't know how to tie those get a little kind of tricky to tie. So the deacon is helping me get vested, and he's helping me get the cincture on. And as he's like kind of leaning into me to kind of get the cincture wrapped around, he whispers to me, you'll have to do this yourself one day. And I just like froze. And I was like, man, like, don't say that. I don't want to do this. But the point is, I never forgot that story. And I'm convinced, it's something I pass on to seminarians a lot in my work with them. I'm convinced the Lord preserves certain memories in our minds to go back to. And when we go back to them, it's like they're becoming present all over again. And he can speak to us that way. People say so many things to us that we forget. But there's certain things that we remember, and I'm confident that some of those things the Lord actually wants to just kind of embed in our minds and speak to us again. That took me some years to figure that kind of thing out that I just said. But once I did figure that out, I was like, maybe I got to look into this, So there were little moments, I think, that I can point to. But I just had the good atmosphere. I was in a good Catholic family. Sunday Mass was non-negotiable. Nightly prayers. We never had priests over to the house. I mean, we liked priests, but we just never had them over to the house. I think that is a huge thing. Have priests over in family's house for dinner. That's a huge thing. So every time we get invited to a family's house, I go, because it's for the kids to see a priest at the dinner table, and he's not just the guy up there in the sanctuary. And then my time as an altar boy, I think that was really, really formative for me. Yeah.
You mentioned 30 young men. Do you meet with young women, and how does that discernment go?
Technically, yes, I'm supposed to, although, truth be told, I haven't met with any young women yet. I've had emails waiting for me, like, hey, can we set up a meeting? And then things just kind of fall through. But my job description does say for women, too, who are thinking of consecrated life. Nicole Bettini, she works at the Archdiocese. She's a consecrated virgin for the Archdiocese. She's not exactly my counterpart for women, but she has a lot more contacts for religious orders or women who are thinking of the consecrated single life. She can be great help for me. So sometimes they will just go talk with her. But technically, yes, women are, I help them with their vocations. The thing is, if a gal is thinking of religious life, those different religious orders have their own vocation director. And so they will just talk to them directly. So I'm not surprised I don't get a lot, because if they're thinking of becoming a Dominican or a Sister of Life, they just go right to those vocation directors, and they don't need to go through me. That's fine. But if a gal's like, I think God wants something for me and I don't know what it is, I might be her first point of contact. But if a gal's pretty sure where she wants to go, she'll just go directly to that order. Yeah, usually. Yes, Sir Pete.
Do vocation directors go out and search out young men and or women or are you kind of just sit back and wait for the men to come to you and say, hey, I'm thinking about it?
It's not so much sit back. I mean, so first off, yeah, I mean, I will make school visits. I got a visit to Chesterton Academy next month that I'm going to go to. Chesterton gets a lot of seminarians, so you kind of want to be strategic. You can't just go every single place. You got to be strategic with the time you're given. So Chesterton Academy I'll go to, some other schools I plan on going to as well. But then hosting events where they do come to me. But you got to host the events. You got to put them out. You can't just wait there without anything. But I do rely on the parish priests to be my extension of vocation director in their parishes. They know these young men. You know, I can go to different parishes every Sunday, but I'm also convinced that a random priest coming to a parish and they don't know who I am might not have as big of an impact as they have their own parish priest saying, hey, have you thought about becoming a priest? I'm not saying I'm not completely discounting my role in that, but I do rely on the parish priest to really take up the mantle and reach those young men versus me like traveling every single place. You know, I'm strategic where I go, but I can't get to every place. That's why I rely on the parish priest to really be that good example. Yes?
Why do you attribute the large numbers at the Andrew dinner, let's say the 50? How?
I do attribute it to, there's probably a couple things. One, but the one that I will focus on is the example of parish priests. I mean, I've looked at these priests who have been ordained in the last, let's say, 10 years. Good men who are attractive in their priesthood. Because I'm looking at these guys in the parishes they're coming from, and they've got priests or parochial vicars who are they're really attractive in their priesthood. It's not rocket science. It makes men like say, I want to do that. I think I could do that. So I'm thinking of the Andrew dinner, the 50 men, the parishes that they came from, the schools that they're at. They have good connections with those priests. I also think, too, that when they see a priest say Mass very reverently, that's helpful. When a priest can give a good homily, that's intellectually like challenging, but understandable at the same time. Men think like, yeah, I kind of like that. I like that my faith makes sense, and I want to pass it on, too. So seeing a priest say Mass and how he preaches, I think is very important as well. But I would credit, I mean, of course, in the prayers of the people of God, so many adoration chapels that we have in St. Paul, Minneapolis, and a prayer for vocations. That's one thing I might talk to Archbishop about, and actually making a prayer for vocations like a mandatory prayer at parishes, you know. We'll see. But, of course, prayer, but as far as like the more tangible things, I think those priests who are just great witnesses, these ones who've been ordained the last 10 years, are doing great work for promoting vocations. Yes, Maureen?
So we've heard from one of the priests that was just recently assigned that one of the mandates he had at his new parish was to establish a vocations committee, which of course is right up our alley.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a mandate to all the priests? Well, you're talking about saying the vocations prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not, would you consider that?
So I'm not aware of any mandate for a vocations committee. I've not given one, and I don't, as far as I know, Archbishop hasn't told me about one. Yeah. But I think some places, some dioceses, I think, do have some sort of structure for that. I'm learning what that looks like. Yeah, but there's no mandate as far as I know.
Just so you know, Serra has, I'm sure people can speak to this better than me, but Serra has a program where they will send trained experts to come, and if a couple of parishes are interested in establishing a vocations committee, they'll come and help train that.
Okay.
So, same.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm over my time, so I'm going to pass it on to Debbie for Father Jangdell. Thank you all very much.